So I came in late, and I'm not really clear who's representing the Department of Health, and I'm assuming it's the four of you.
Invenergy.
You're the attorney, right?
Invenergy.
Who?
Invenergy.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going to address the four of you.
Just state your name for me.
My name is Mary Ryan. I live here in the town of Burrillville in the village of Mapleville. And I'm going to speak. Some of you are familiar to me because I think I'm probably familiar to you a little bit. Farmers Market and the garlic breadsticks that people are nutty about, right? Yeah. So the four of you, can I ask before anybody, I say what I have to say, how many of you were here 16 years ago when the MTBE crisis happened, working at the Department of Health? Yeah, you were, but you were, okay. So the reason why I ask you this, if you could all look at me just for a minute, you're hearing probably some hostility, and it's probably, a little unnerving. And I'm going to say this to you with all sincerity. You're the face of some of the individuals, sadly, that we were betrayed by 16 years ago. And so a lot of the stuff that you're hearing from is fear, terror, frightening, because we lived it. We're the data that, long-term EPA is going to be looking to see the diseases that happen. Sadly, I'm going to be a little graphic, and I hope that this camera can kind of but I had a small coffee shop in Pasco, in the village of Pasco, and I lost my business as a result of the water. All summer long, there were people that came in, and aside from some of the health issues that I experienced with as well as my husband and my children, unknowingly, because it wasn't disclosed to us that the water was contaminated until the Department of Health did come in and tell us in September. But nonetheless, there were women and men that came in with severe respiratory illnesses all summer long. They were very, very sick. There were women, and when you're someone who has a coffee shop, they confide in you, really intimately. And there were women who didn't know each other, men who didn't know each other, but would stop in and kind of talk. And women who were bleeding rectally, bleeding vaginally, not in a healthy way, and it was related to the water. There were people who came in with severe bronchitis. There were 10 of us that went to the court. I was instrumental in filing the petition, the injunction to shut the wells down. So I have firsthand knowledge of the experience, and the fact of the matter is that we had found it necessary to have to go to court, which was disgusting. There were months that went by when nobody helped. So I lost my business, I left, but I continued to pursue because I witnessed the illnesses, and as a citizen, I felt it was my responsibility. The tip of the iceberg, there was this young little child who was 6 years old, and every time she literally sat on the toilet seat, the back of her legs would, and I witnessed it, so it was sick. They literally peeled off of her legs, peeled, literally. It was awful, and I'm a mother. And that's what drove me to do what I did. And I was sickened by the politics. And 16 years later, I was horrified to be driving down the street and ask for a sign to say, I'm going to support you in your efforts to prevent this power plant. But I was horrified when the young man told me that they were considering using this contaminated water, this MTBE-filled water. I was absolutely horrified. There's a court order that's still in effect. If you're Invenergy, you were aware of this. as was the Department of Health. And as I have been reading, I saw that there was a letter of intent to begin, submitted by Invenergy along with the PUD. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit of background. The PUD, last time, 16 years ago, was able to, successfully pit state agencies against one another, pit families against one another, districts, the water districts against one another. And while they just sat there, they actually got a $5 million settlement 3 years ago. And part of that settlement was intended to clean up the water. To my knowledge, they have never spent a penny on trying to clean up the water. Secondly, they also, my understanding is that DEM, whatever remediation had been done, was done by DEM, and the PUD, again, did not contribute anything to that, that effort. So I read in here that Invenergy has this letter of intent, and in it, it refers to, let me see, it refers to a, quote, consent order dated December 28th, 2001, that was, that they relied on to support their decision and the determination that they were going to reactivate the wells. I spoke with June Swallow today because there was also, through the APRA request, we were able to obtain some documents that we believe were also submitted by Invenergy and PUD to the Department of Health, which I'm going to read this. Part of this one document states approvals if required to activate well 3A. And the document here looks like it's a portion of a pamphlet of some sort, and it says, this is really important, as a result of contamination of wells number 3A and 3, number 3, and under a consent order signed, speaking of the same consent order that they were talking about in their letter of intent, in January 15th, 2002, PUD is prohibited from using water from wells number 3A and number 3, except, quote, for remediation of the contamination as directed by the Director of Health, the Department of Environmental Management, Water Resources, or other appropriate state officials, but in no event shall the wells be used to, and Invenergy and or PUD inserted a word that is not, nor was it ever intended to be there, drinking water supply. This language that I just read to you and quoted had nothing to do with any consent order that was issued by the Department of Health. There are two orders. One of the orders is a consent order that was actually signed on February 7th of 2002. And that consent order was in response, it was a DOH consent order that was in response to a directive from Department of Health on December 28th to appear before them for the revocation of their ability to utilize well 3 and 3A for their water. They took the language from another order, which is a Superior Court order. That Superior Court order intended, because I was there, and I have the language, and I'm happy to provide you with a copy, but I'm pretty sure that the Rhode Island Department of Health has one already. That's right. And in that order, I was there for the decision. And the judge was very specific that he was very concerned about the flow of water and the contamination and contaminating Harrisville's water supply or any other waterways. Now, Invenergy and the PUD has represented that the water doesn't have to be, or it's not going to be. As a matter of fact, they've highlighted this fact on their part, that the water's not going to be potable, it's not going to be clean, so don't worry about it. We're not flowing it to have anybody drink it. We're just flowing, I think that the terminology is industrial grade. Well, the industrial grade, if the acceptable level is 20 parts per billion less than or less than 5, there's been instances across the test wells that have shown 55,000 parts per billion. And the order that was issued by the Superior Court is still in effect. That didn't go away. But in Invenergy's application, they submitted that their flow of water was in conformity with a consent order. Again, referring to the Department of Health, never disclosing to either the Department of Health or maybe they did, but not to the EFSB in their application, not to DEM, that there was an order in effect, which, by the way, they have to address. And they should have never been allowed to walk into the EFSB because it was based on a false pretense. Now, when I also read the application, I saw that there were references to Pennsylvania and said, why are they talking about Pennsylvania? And there was a couple of references to, and not that this is not irrelevant because it isn't, they referred to Rhode Island as Rhode Islandia. So I'm like, what? So the information that they referenced about Pennsylvania seemed to be irrelevant to Rhode Island. And definitely didn't have any, there were too many references that were inconsistent. So I went to Pennsylvania because the first thing I thought of, I said, well, this sounds like a cut and paste application. So I'm going to go to Pennsylvania to see what's going on in Invenergy. And sure enough, Invenergy was rejected just a few months ago by, I believe it was Elizabeth County. And they were approved by another county called Jessup County. And when the residents appealed, Invenergy asked for sanctions, which is pretty equivalent to a slap suit. So that's big corporate behavior. But I know you know that. And what does this have to do with health? These people are willing to flow contaminated water at any level, at any cost, and transmit it 3.5 miles from the wellhead to a huge facility that's going to wipe out tons of trees, which again is going to impact the health and safety of the community. The statute that the EFSB has to follow includes their decision making includes the reliance on how safe is this project and how will it impact on the public safety and well-being of the community. And they're relying on you to do so. And I know that's probably a big burden, but they're asking you. And one of the concerns I had, aside from when I read your advisory, your draft, is that I spoke with June Swallow today. And June Swallow indicated that, well, you know what, the Department of Health doesn't have any jurisdiction over this matter. And she said, because it's not drinking water, it's industrial grade, so it's not a problem. And throughout the application and other materials, the Invenergy Corporation has implied or indicated actually that they have met with the Department of Health multiple times as well as DEM, and I know that's true. But they certainly have utilized the Department of Health in particular to sort of advocate that you support them. And so as a matter of public trust, it becomes challenging because you're the face of the same people who betrayed us 16 years ago, and I'm reaching out to you and saying, I don't accuse you of anything. I saw what happened, I saw what the PU did the last time, and they were able to successfully have internal arguments with state agencies, with water districts, and others. And so I implore you to pay close attention to that. And if you haven't, to please review the application. And I'm going to provide, not tonight, but I will provide to, is it Barbara? I will provide a copy of the transcript of the decision of the court, the order of the court, a copy of the consent order that they are referring to, a copy of this document which was provided by Invenergy, with the language that's misrepresentative of what the court order said. So they really can't circumvent the court order at all. And this has caused a lot of madness, a lot of costs. There's police presence here. There's been police presence here every meeting. You know, the town of Burrillville has now spent $175,000 in legal fees. They've spent more than $100,000 more than you've budgeted for consultants' fees. The state of Rhode Island has met multiple times the Department of Health, the Department of Environmental Management, the EFSB. All of these costs, we're running around like idiots for a company from Chicago who doesn't give any concern about who we are or our health. Well, I have...
if you need a lot more time, you can come back after everybody else has had an opportunity.
That's fine.
Keep going.
That's fine. Just hang on. I just want to say something. And I respect what you're saying.
Harrisville just shut it down.
Yeah.
What do you mean? So what I'll do,
Being heard. The voice of the people is being heard.
so what I'm going to do is, as a courtesy, I'm going to present a letter to you. Are you Barbara? Okay. And I'm going to ask you to distribute them. I'm also going to ask you to internally look at what's going on, because this company is utilizing you particularly to advocate its position, and it's so wrong, and the state of Rhode Island is suffering for it. So I will do that.
Thank you, Mary.